Hello, and welcome to our WBW newscast starting Shakespeare. Like many others, the Way Back When news team has been interested in discovering what makes William Shakespeare the soul of an age. We will be going through copies of his plays and meeting some well-known faces in Shakespeare's dramatic gallery. Macbeth, Viola, Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, Shylock, Prince Hal, Bottom the Weaver, and more. But you may be wondering, who was this man Shakespeare? Why have his plays lasted so long? Where were they first performed? Who acted in them, and were they really great? WBW News will try to answer some of these questions by imagining we can interview some of the people most closely associated with Shakespeare's life and work. Through their answers, we will piece together the picture of Shakespeare, the man and the theater he worked for. But let's start one step back with Shakespeare's father, John Shakespeare. Son of a tenant farmer, he lived in Snitterfield at Warwickshire. John probably never went to school. Instead, he served his time as a glover. He eventually started a business in Stratford-upon-Avon, selling gloves and leather articles from his house in Henley Street and from a local market stall. John married Mary Arden, son of Robert Arden, who owned the farm in which John had been raised. He soon found himself involved in local affairs. First, he became a counselor. One of his jobs was to taste the ale in town and make sure it was up to strength. He became one of the town constables. On his nightly rounds, he picked up the odd drunkard, catches a prowling thief, and make sure that the citizens are keeping their peace. John was promoted to chamberlain and was in charge of the town's finances. Next, he was promoted to alderman, and finally to high bailiff, the Stratford's chief citizen. In the meantime, John had become the father of a large family. His eldest son he named William, the writer who became so revered. We'll let my friend Ciara take it up from there.
Thank you, Natalia. Hello, Nathan. We know that you were a member of Lord Chamberlain's men, later to become the King's men. How old were you when you joined the company?
I must have been about 11.
And how long were you in the company as one of its junior members?
Until my voice broke and I began to grow a beard. I began as an apprentice and, like all apprentices, I had to learn my craft from those who had already mastered it.
And who better than Richard Burbage?
Yes, Dick, but also Will Shakespeare. He often directed us in our parts, and because he had written the plays, he knew exactly how he wanted them performed.
Can you tell us something of the approach he had to acting? Did he ever lose his temper and storm out of the theater because you were ruining his lines?
No, not quite, but certain types of acting used to annoy him. You read Hamlet, I suppose. Then you know the advice that Hamlet gives to the players who are visiting the royal court. Speak the speech, I pray you, as pronounced to you, trippingly on the tongue, but if you mouth it as many of our players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines. That was Will speaking to us. He hated an actor who strutted and bellowed, one who would tear a passion to tatters, to very rags, to split the ears of the groundlings. Then there were the comedians who departed from the script and held up the plot while they did their own comic business. He couldn't bear them either.
As he had every right to. He presumably wanted the actor to submerge himself in the part and not play to the gallery.
It was playing to the groundlings that was trouble, not playing to the galleries.
Of course. But as you were a small company, Shakespeare must have had individual actors in mind when he was writing his plays. Burbage for Shylock and Lear, for example. He could write parts for their particular talents. Did he create any roles specially for the young actors?
We apprentices used to have all the small parts, you know. Pygmies, fairies, beggars, page boys, and young children. And boys played all the women's parts, too. That's why there are so few female characters in the plays. I stopped being a boy actor when my voice broke and I grew a beard.
Why weren't the female roles taken by women?
It wasn't considered respectable for women to act in public theaters. Even the male actors were thought of as rogues and vagabonds by some of the city authorities. That's why most of the theaters were outside the city boundaries.
Wasn't it difficult getting the audience to take you seriously as women? Didn't they laugh and scoff?
Not at all. Boy players were very popular with playgoers in wigs and dresses. We were very convincing as women. Besides, Will often made it easier for us by developing plots in which the girls dress up as boys to conceal their real identity. Twelfth Night, As You Like It, The Merchant of Venice, Cymbeline.
So the great roles of Juliet and Cleopatra were originally played by boys?
Yes.
And you, Nathan, which of the great female roles fell to you?
Well, as you can see, I'm rather tall and thin. Do you remember that in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Helena is described as being like a painted maypole? I was Helena. And in As You Like It, Rosalind speaks of herself as more than common tall. I was Rosalind.
These are very demanding parts for a young boy to play in a professional theater. The young actors in your day obviously had to be very talented.
With a different play to perform each day, we had to be on our toes. But the apprentices didn't only act. We were general dog's bodies. We were at everyone's beck and call, sent to the tailor to collect the costumes, put in charge of properties, sent out to buy the ale, told to make sure that the cannon was prepared. There were 101 jobs for us to do as well as act, and when we were touring it was even more hectic.
We know that the theaters in London closed during the plague years, and that acting companies took themselves off to the provinces with a repertory of plays. Were you glad to get away from London?
It was hard work, traveling those long, dusty roads with our horse-drawn carts, loaded up with our supplies. But after the glories of our royal performances, we were strolling players once more, roughing it.
Much more comfortable to have remained in town. Had you ever considered leaving the public theater and joining one of the private companies of boy actors?
No, I had more scope in Shakespeare's company than I would have in anywhere else. But boy actors were in great demand to play the female roles, and could be bought and sold like merchandise by the actors' managers.
And when your days as a boy actor were over, what happened? Did you stay on to play important male roles and leave Helena and Rosalind to your younger successor?
Yes, then I too became a kind of master and taught apprentices to act, just as I had been taught. And so the profession continued and grew and the tradition of art was preserved. I hope some of it has found its way to the 21st century.
I'm sure it has. And if you were to see our Shakespeare productions, perhaps you would recognize some of the technique. Only now Juliet, Cleopatra, and Portia would be played by women, not by boys.
By women? They're not ashamed to be seen on public stage?
No, they're proud of it. Many a girl dreams of being a famous actress performing before an admiring audience.
And the boys? What parts do they play now?
They usually play boys' parts, I'm afraid. The young Nathan of today has to be content with less spectacular parts than you played. He wouldn't start his career as an apprentice to a great actor in a theatrical company, but as a student in a drama school.
Yet filled with the same love of acting, struggling to interpret the lines and create a living character from them?
I think so.
Then things haven't changed so much. We belong to the same profession. Thank you for reassuring me.
Thank you, Nathan. Back to you, Natalia.